We'll just wait for a minute and then Sohana, you can like set the tune and we'll have it started. I think Jason is also joining. See, I don't think it's too late for you at this time.
No, it's 8:30.
Okay, then it's fine.
It's too late for you guys.
True. We have just started the next day.
So you have an early start. That's okay.
In which part of US are you presently in, Pat?
So I'm just outside of Boston, so it's about 1:30
Okay,
Eastern
so
time.
then you are at a comfortable time, not too early for you.
Yeah. I think I luck out.
You're after lunch, not before that.
Yes, a little after lunch.
Good time to speak, Pat, right? You won't feel lazy after this.
Definitely. Won't be tired or anything.
So full we have Jason.
No, we can just Sohana, you can just set the tune.
Maybe another minute. So 5
Yeah,
minutes.
so that we can do, yes.
So by the way, guys, Sohana is going to be the host for tonight.
Hi, everyone.
Hey,
So happy to
Emily.
have you. Same here. All right, we'll just wait for a couple of more minutes, wait for more people to join in, and then let's dive right into the conversation.
Sohana, let's just start it.
All right. Hi, everyone. I hope you're all keeping well. Welcome to the very first episode of Edu-Viate, a web series presented by one of India's fastest growing edtech companies, BrightChamps. BrightChamps provides online courses on programming, artificial intelligence, design thinking, and financial literacy to kids aged between 6 to 16 years. Today, we have gathered to answer one question, which is there a silver lining in the clouds of Omicron? For this purpose, we have with us a distinguished set of panelists who have one thing in common, and that is the drive to creatively use technology to transform the education landscape across the globe. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jason Breed, President at Digital Futures Initiative. With over 20 years of corporate experience in digital transformation, his goal is for DFI to lead the change in teaching responsible digital use and personal well-being, bringing the best information available to both students and parents. Our second panelist for the day is Mr. Effie, co-founder at Plethora. His vision with Plethora is to develop and practice core interdisciplinary skills of complex problem solving and computational thinking. The game-like environment of his joint venture, Plethora, introduces scenario-based challenges that are independent of a specific programming language or syntax. Our third panelist today is Mr. Pat, Enterprise Sales Manager for the Northeast region at Wacom Technology Corporation. He is a firm believer in the power of creativity and the potential that it holds to inspire new ideas and new imaginations. As the manager of the Northeastern region, he is responsible for providing innovative digital technologies that support all aspects of human creativity. We are so incredibly excited to have you with us today. Thank you for taking out the time to be here.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you for having us.
All right, moving on. So my first question to the audience present here is, what do you think this number signifies? The number that's on your screen, 1.2 billion. You can use the chat box, you can unmute yourself, you can raise your hand and take a guess at what you think this number means. What does it signify? And no, it's not the population of India. It's close to that, but take a guess at what you think this number means. Registrations. Well, yes, one day I'm sure we'll reach that place where 1.2 billion people register for these web series, but I'll tell you what exactly this number means. Absolutely, it is the number of students who have been out of classrooms owing to the pandemic. And I know what you must be thinking, that given that this is the magnitude of the situation that we are speaking of, how can there even be a silver lining in this situation? And that's exactly what we'll be telling you today, what we'll be discussing. To answer this, let us take a trip around the globe. The first stop is Indonesia. Due to social distancing, the class strength was halved. Now, I know that seems scary, that seems like it's not a positive thing, but when you actually dig deeper, it means that it leads to higher levels of interaction between the pupil and teacher. And that's exactly the kind of silver lining that we are talking of. Our second destination is Singapore. Because of universities being or favoring remote learning, they were charging less for online courses, given that there was no fee for accommodation or living expenses incurred. This means that the economic accessibility had increased. And just like this, there are so many instances around the globe where there has been a silver lining because of Omicron. To shed more light on this, I would love for Mr. Pat from Boston to tell us about how virtual schooling has opened doors to the future of learning. What do you think, Pat? How has that transformed the educational landscape across the globe?
Well, we've seen, the number of students and the interaction with the teachers using our tablets, especially, has been really a breath of fresh air from what we're hearing from our end users. It's scary to think that the students are home. Parents are actually turned into teachers now, so it can be kind of a frightening situation for a lot of individuals, but we're seeing the opportunity really for growth in the education market. We've actually seen a growth of about 250% with our tablets and the digital inking technology. So there is definitely a silver lining that we see.
Definitely, absolutely. And we also have with us Effie from Israel. So we'd love to hear how the education industry in Israel has transformed. Are we seeing a surge in tablets being sold just like in the United States of America? Or how is it that Israel has coped up with virtual or remote learning?
Well, first again, thank you for having me. Let's remember that Israel is a has a 10 million people population, so we're looking at a little bit of a scale down from definitely Pat's numbers. But Israel edtech industry generally is thriving, and as a result, a lot of new innovation is coming into schools now. One of the programs that the government actually funded was a computer for every household. So that also caused an increase in the demand for a lot of the education technology that is being provided here. And it's definitely on the rise. I mean, from national programs to local programs, but this is definitely on the rise. And the silver lining is definitely there. I think that Omicron has brought changes as well to our lives. We're learning this pandemic as it goes. But I guess, again, we'll see more of this technology coming in the very near future.
It's interesting that you speak of the future. Technology has already transformed the educational landscape so rapidly. So where do you think it is headed? How intertwined do you think education and tech would become in the future? And perhaps what would a classroom look like? Would it be the brick and mortar setup, or would it completely go to a virtual space?
Well, I've been, probably pitching and, talking about classrooms over the past 4 or 5 years. Look at the classrooms today. They probably look like they looked 50, 60, 70 years ago. I mean, there's no big change in how they look. We're 22 years now into the 21st century, talking about 21st century skills like, critical thinking and creativity and problem solving. I think that the main shifting we're going to see is towards teaching skills rather than teaching data. I mean, data is available today everywhere, not like when we were kids and it was only available through the book you bought. So it's not about the data, it's about what you can do with the data, because the data is available everywhere. And this is, I think, the one thing that COVID is going to change for us. As parents, as citizens. I mean, COVID has brought changes in all aspects of life. Education being a very important part of it. And I think this is going to change dramatically how we see things. Countries also understand that hybrid learning is something that has to be done. We already work and know of changes coming to introduce to in terms of adaptive learning and introducing AI into schools. So I think this is dramatically going to change. Let's not forget, I mean, the introduction of the iPhone was January 2007. Look at how things changed since then. So technology changes rapidly, and future holds a very bright, it's a very bright future for education, I think.
Definitely agree with every word that you said there. And Pat, we'd love to hear what you have to say to this. That do you think AI is something that definitely should be introduced to children? It is something that leads to them learning skills like problem solving, like Effie had mentioned.
Absolutely. And I think to kind of piggyback on what Effie was talking about, I think the one word that's kind of come out of this is collaboration. I think there's been a lot more collaboration going on in the past 2 years since we've kind of gone through the pandemic. Collaboration with both students and teachers, but also, really involving the parents. The parents, I think, have a little bit more involvement now than they have in the past, which is a pretty interesting kind of way to go about things. But I do think that, corporate America is changing as well. I think more and more companies are seeing that their employees don't need to go into the office. So there could be a little bit of a change in the thought of students having to be in the classroom all the time. Could be a week on, a week off. You just kind of never know where this is going to take us. But I think the collaboration of all of the hardware and the software that's available to students really offers that possibility for a change in the classroom.
Absolutely. Collaboration is something that has increased because of Omicron, because of COVID-19. In fact, before this, it was just the parent-teacher meetings that were doing the rounds once or twice every year. Now that is the constant state. Parents and teachers have a medium of speaking so often. I don't know if that's good for children or not, but that is how it is. And all right, loving the inputs that we are getting all the way from Israel and the United States. Okay, moving on. If we could go back to the slide of the classrooms. So classrooms about 20 years ago looked something so simple, something so traditional, just I think desks and black chalkboard or a whiteboard. That's how it looked, something so simple. From this, and in fact, even 10 years ago, we don't have to go back so back in time, even 10 years ago, classrooms looked like this. But now when we think of classrooms, we can't help but imagine a case where every child has access to a computer, every child has access to another tablet. And just like Pat mentioned, that tablets have risen, the sales of that has risen. When we talk about the future of technology and the future of education, do you think the last couple of years, because of COVID, has really just given us a head start into the future? Which means that if COVID was not there, we probably would have reached the stage where we are at currently in perhaps another 5 or 6 years. But because of COVID taking place, we've just catapulted into this area in just 2 years. Do you think that's something that's happened?
I definitely think that we've had to pivot and kind of make that change a little bit quicker than we probably normally would have. That being said, I think that with all the technology that's out there, I think we're in a pretty good space to be able to do that in such a quick and timely manner that we've had to make that change.
Okay, I can actually give a personal view. Two of my children are in junior high and high school, and they actually got laptops before tablets before the COVID. I mean, it has nothing to do with it. Just moving instead of books, just moving into digital platform. And for them, coming home and in COVID and learning from home was as simple as just going to school. I mean, it's the same. The use of Google Classroom and other softwares were just very transparent for them. It was harder for us as parents, but it was very transparent for them, and they just continued learning as they did before that. I think that the adoption or the early adopters of such technologies had a very good head start when it came to adjusting to the new situation.
I think kids are so wise with technology too. I know. So, similar to Effie, I have a daughter that's in 4th grade and a son that's in middle school in 7th grade. And to think back, about 10 years ago, the fact of what they could do on a iPad was incredible. They could navigate through the different screens and better than some adults. Same with an iPhone, the ability to kind of go through the different apps. I've got some, older parents that were not so adoptive of the iPhone. It took them a little bit of time to get used to it, and just the quick thinking and ability for them to navigate through the different screens. It's really amazing, and they just are able to take that into today's, school and get into the tablets and get into the various learning management systems that the schools have, and they're just so quickly able to adopt, that new technology.
Absolutely. In fact, I wasn't in school until very long ago, but I remember when I was in school, we had art classes where we'd have a canvas and paints. But now that my sister's in school, she's doing the same things on her tablet. It's all about graphic designing and digital learning. And as the graph of that has been so steep. So how do you think that tech has contributed to this steeper graph of learning for our students, and that too, especially during the pandemic? How steep has it been, and where is it headed truly?
My view of it is that the pandemic just helped absorbing or adopting new technologies into schools. I mean, I don't think that the problem was the technology itself, just how fast systems, schools, ministries of education can adopt those technologies and offer them to students. I mean, one example I can give from our company is that during the pandemic, when things were not very clear, the Ministry of Education actually recorded several lesson plans that we offer and just broadcasted them on national TV, and then allowing students to come to our platform and play. So it's really a matter of how fast systems can adopt the change. That's my 2 cents on that.
And definitely.
I think you're right. And I think that it can also be up to the teacher, to the professor that's teaching the course. Sometimes they're maybe the slow adopters. So it might be a little bit more of a challenge for them to be able to, put all this information out to the students. So they also, they have a real tough job to be able to kind of change their way of teaching and instructing that they might be doing for the past 20 years. And all of a sudden they really need to change and really get, with the current times and be able to teach the students so that students are able to really absorb what they're instructing. So it can be a challenge for both the instructors and for the students too.
Absolutely. It's been quite a challenge, but I think everyone is coping with it very well. In fact, there have been so many studies that have shown that children are actually learning better at home or in a virtual space. So given that both of you deal with children so often through your own institutes and your passion for EdTech, have you also received that kind of response where children are saying that, yes, we are learning better at home, or we are learning better in a Google Classroom as opposed to a real physical setup?
So I think I've seen it with my own kids. The ability for them to take whatever content that they're learning, be able to do a homework assignment and upload it into the system and have the teacher be able to get it literally within seconds instead of having to, the old school way of filling out a piece of paper, bringing it into the classroom, passing it in, the teacher correcting it, taking time. Everything now can be just automated in a much faster way. So the student can get the assignment over to the teacher, they correct it in a matter of moments, and they could push it back out to the student for any sort of edits or changes that need to be made. So I think the speed of which assignments are, again, turned in, corrected, and returned back to the students is great. I know that my daughter had a little bit of a challenge with remote learning. I think students that might have like an IEP or some sort of a learning disability can face some real challenges, and with time management, and if they're kind of set on their own to be able to do an assignment, sometimes students, get sidetracked at home. A dog runs by and, they're looking at, what they need to do, or there's a lot of obstacles at home that students need to kind of get around. But I think all in all, I think that's, I think that, again, the speed of being able to get the assignments in and returned is one of the best things I think that's come out of this.
Yeah, and I also think that, and I totally agree that, research actually shows, and it's amazing that online learning, is showing increased retention of information, and it takes less time, and exactly what Pat's saying about submitting, works and working even together with other students online. The envelope. The full envelope of it is looking at actually, I think, also teachers, because what we see today is teachers, and we look at them as we used to look at them as the one passing on the knowledge. I think this is going to have a major change in the coming years, because it's not going to be the same teacher we remember as students, but more of a facilitator, or the person in charge of directing the class to the right direction, rather than knowing all the information and trying to pass it on. I think that's the major change that is starting to happen. It will take time, because it's big systems, but some teachers are already doing that, and I think that it benefits students greatly when they're doing that.
Absolutely. There's a change that we need to adapt to. So what would your suggestion or advice to teachers and students both be? How is it that they can more smoothly adapt to this change? Because this new normal is here to stay. Everyone knows that it's not going anywhere in the near future. So how is it that this transition can take place more smoothly and make it a better learning experience for all?
Well, I think there's a ton of content out there virtually. So, go online, you can find any sort of information that you need, whether it's a teacher that's, looking to kind of better get the information out to the students. I think that students can look at different ways that they can be collaborative. I think that there's a ton of opportunity for, different applications for like whiteboarding and collaboration tools to be able to work with your fellow students. So I think just kind of staying on the same path that they're on right now. I think a lot of the students are having successes. So just working off what's been working for them, I think is kind of the most critical thing for them, is just to, adapt as the changes come, get familiar and get really familiar with that technology and ask a lot of questions.
I think that I'll add the parents' view of this issue because again, some schools, some teachers are it's taking them longer to adapt to this situation. I think that in this situation, and we see it again on our end, parents are taking charge and changing things for their children. So they're finding online materials, finding online programs and options for their children, so they can take a little bit of independent course and allowing them to get some good progress without having to rely only on schools.
Absolutely, most definitely. I think it just goes on to show how tech has unleashed an era of endless learning. So, to our viewers today, what, according to you, are some of the examples of IT tools being introduced into a classroom? Just like Pat mentioned, that for a more engaging experience or for a faster or smoother experience, teachers are now automating the entire process, something that went through the traditional route of a notebook going to the teacher and being checked now takes place completely online. So, what are such examples of IT tools that you can spot? And go ahead and type your answers in the chat box. We'd love to hear from you. It can be something as simple as, auto grading your own quizzes, or something more complex. So anything that comes to your mind. And I'll also take that question to our panelists today. If you had to mention, let's say, the top IT tool that you came across, something that was very interesting to you, what would that be? Something that you've seen perhaps in your daughter's classroom, or something that you do want to implement? We'd love to hear that.
Well, as far as our Wacom tablets, I've had both of my children using Wacom tablets. Again, it's the ability for them to be able to digitize, their drawing, so they can write. I think Wacom as a whole has previously been known as a creative tool for artists and designers, but we've seen such an explosion on the K-12 side and even in higher ed, where when a student is in 3rd or 4th grade and they're really getting familiar with writing, the ability to digitize their writing is really critical. So to put that pen in their hand instead of a mouse is one of the best things that we've seen for students. And that being said, I think something like a front of the class podium or a smart board for the front of the class. So obviously we don't see the whiteboard or the normal blackboards, chalkboards anymore. So those whiteboards we can go up and you can draw and really interact, I think are great tools for the classroom.
We still see the blackboards, by the way. So I'm really hoping that this technology, which is probably available for the past 5 years, is going to go into Israel, or at least the majority of Israel. I think that the one thing I see in common over here is the Google Classroom. It's really ruling how schools communicate with students. I see schools that implemented this technology years ago, 5-6 years ago, give or take, and it's working smoothly and perfectly. And I see schools that their teachers got trained on Google Classroom about a year ago, and you see the differences. You see, it's a huge gap that's slowly shrinking, but the early adopters are gaining a lot of momentum, and we can see it.
It's transformational. It really is. Those learning management systems.
Yeah.
They have transformed the landscape completely. And we have a few viewers pitching in. So Vanchika says that plagiarism scanner is something that one of the IT tools that have really been in use this past couple of years. And we have another viewer who's saying personalized learning experience with the help of AI. So it's interesting that he mentions AI. AI is always something that is thought of to be quite daunting, but when we actually think of it, it's there right from the moment that we wake up to the moment that we sleep. We're surrounded by it completely. And sometimes we think that AI is not something that children perhaps should be introduced to, or that there's a certain age beyond which they should start learning subjects like AI or MI. So what, according to you, is the correct age for children to start learning this? And apart from the obvious tech skills, are there any soft skills that come out of taking courses on AI or other tech courses?
It's definitely a very interesting topic. I don't know if there's necessarily an age that I would say that you have to start, but whether it's AI, whether it's coding, there's so many things out there right now for students to really be able to get to really set themselves apart from other students, whether they're looking at going into private schools for high school or college. These are different things that can really set students apart from one another. So I'd say the earliest that they can really start grasping the materials and really understanding it, then that would be the right time. Again, I don't think there's necessarily a age 7 or 8 is the time to do it, but there's some students that are a little bit more mature than others in their grades. I think that as soon as they can really start to take on some new responsibilities, I think, again, AI, coding, some of these other things are critical for these students to really set themselves apart.
When we're teaching computational thinking, which is computer science, basically, we've taken a different approach than what's in the market today. The market is focused on teaching coding. For computational thinking, we think that coding is a little bit of is a little bit limiting in the sense of being very syntax oriented, and we rather take the holistic way of computational thinking or computer science and provide with the skills that has to do with this topic. I think AI and other or let's say other programming languages and AI comes a little bit later down the road. And it's definitely important, and you can see also in the OECD that's taking the position of adding computer science, computational thinking sections into the coming PISA exams. So my view is that if students like it, they love it. It's a very good thing, and if not, need to find the right way to introduce those advanced topics for them so they can grow from it. They don't have to be programmers in the future. They don't have to be AI programmers, but it is important for them to understand what abstraction is and what recursion is and stuff that can help them with their day-to-day life.
Absolutely, and it is because of technology that we have been able to survive the pandemic. If it wasn't for tech, then our schools would have been shut. Our students would not have received the education that would have made them leaders of tomorrow. So it is so important. And like Pat rightly mentioned, that there's no right age, but as long as you are ready to grasp concepts, I think everybody is ready to learn these technological concepts or to be introduced to the world of AI. And apart from the technical skills, are there any soft skills that learning such courses imparts amongst the students? And I'm asking this because we've been joined by so many parents today. I'm sure they would love to know the benefits of learning courses like these.
Well, it's numerous researches show that learning computational thinking at early ages and even later improves the what we call 21st century skills, like critical thinking and creativity and problem solving and teamwork and information literacy. So at the end of the day, all those skills that I just mentioned, you can't really learn them. I mean, it's not like a textbook that you can read and then you implement it. It's stuff that you gain. It's skills that you gain throughout the course of schooling. And the one example that I love always to open with is actually a question. And we introduced this question to 250 students at the 4th grade. And the question goes like this. I mean, a rabbit and a turtle want to cross the river. It takes the rabbit 1 hour and 2 hours for the turtle. And the question is, how long will it take them to get to the other side? Now, we know it takes them 2 hours. 90% of the students answer 3 hours because they know math. They learn math in school. They know how to add 2 and 1 and they get 3. They don't understand that they're doing it together. This is what we call parallelism. They're doing it in parallel. So 4th graders don't know how to do that. Those are the skills we need to actually provide them with so they can take it and use them in early ages.
Yeah, it's a great answer. I mean, I think the critical thinking and teamwork, collaboration, I mean, it brings off, again, a whole different kind of grouping of skills than just your basic skills that you're going to get from a math or science course. So I think that there's just so much positive things that come besides, the normal stuff. Again, I think the teamwork, especially being able to kind of really break things down differently than you would for a math class. It's definitely a very, very interesting topic, whether it's AI, VR, coding, all these different things where, it's going to take kind of a different side of your brain to really get through it. But it's really exciting to think about, young students working on this type of technology. It really is.
It is so exciting. And in fact, so I'm surrounded by people who are now applying for jobs, given that we just wrapped up with college. And now we realize how important it is to learn soft skills like problem solving and innovative thinking. And no one's going to teach you that. In college, we don't have classes on problem solving. And I think that's where AI, or as you mentioned, VR or coding, these technologies come into play because they actually teach a child how is it that you can solve problems more effectively. And I think that's the gap that platforms like BrightChamps and DFI and Wacom and Plethora are trying to bridge. So kudos to all of you for doing that. I think it's the need of the hour. Now I'm mindful of the time that we have, so I'd love to open the house to questions from our audience. I'm sure they're super excited to be interacting with you both today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to make use of the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screens. You can drop in your questions, you can use the chat box, or you can even raise your hand. We can unmute you and you can directly talk to our panelists today. If you have any questions surrounding what they do, how is it that you can reach that place where you are inventing technologies or where you are helping other students in this space, they'd love to answer that. All right, we have the first question. So Ashutosh is asking, why is it important to incorporate an introduction to AI, app development, coding as part of a child's early education?
I'll take that. First, early education. I mean, it's a question. I mean, what's early education? We at least start at the 4th grade because we understand that there's a certain level of understanding that the students has to be apart from reading in order to start understanding a little bit of abstracted concepts like we discussed earlier, like parallelism or multiplicity or even abstraction per se. So I don't think it's the age thing. I think it's more of how mature the child is and the fact that he's being introduced to such topics, whether it's by coding or AI or pure computational thinking. But I think the concept itself of a student understanding what abstraction is, for example, is very important. I mean, we're surrounded by abstraction on a daily basis, from maps, which is the perfect example for abstraction, or when we want to explain something without adding too much details. So we are, and even the students, the children are surrounded by that on a daily basis. So they need at least to understand the topic of or to grasp the understanding of what are we talking about when we talk about abstraction. So this is something that I think is very important for every child. I think the age is less. Is a little bit less relevant. We also teach, by the way, in junior high and in high schools, the same concepts. I mean, not all students go and learn coding, even when they get to high schools. And understanding those concepts specifically is very important.
Definitely,
Yeah,
important.
I would say, coding or, app development, it's not going to be for everybody. I mean, you're going to have certain students that are attracted to it and understand it. And can thrive with it. You're going to have some students that don't get it at all. So I think it depends on the student. It depends on how it's taught to them, what they're actually grasping from it. There's a lot of opportunity in the job market for app development, for coding, the back end of a lot of technology systems. So there's going to be a certain percentage of the population that's going to really understand it and thrive with it. So I think, again, it's not going to be for everybody. And as Effie said, I don't think that there's a certain age that you have to say, by 6 years old or by 8 years old, you should understand this concept. I think, once a student gets familiar with it, if they want to expand on it, then they have that ability to do so. But I think that, to kind of answer the second question here, how should students know when coding, whether coding is where the future lies? I mean, it definitely lies. It's there. It's an option for students. Again, there's a ton of job opportunity when they get out of school to be able to, to work in a coding. I just think that it's something that is so critical for those who really understand it and want to move forward with it. I just think it's such a tremendous opportunity.
I think that it's the answer for that is very individual. I mean, whether I have 4 kids, I probably can say about one that loves coding, the rest don't. I personally have a computer science degree. I hate coding, but the fact that I learned coding helps me a lot in understanding from what I'm doing on a daily basis and understanding how to build, for example, an algorithm. It has nothing to do with coding per se. It's the understanding of what coding provides you with, and the fact that you can, relate to what an app is doing or what your friend is doing on his computer has a lot to do with how you perceive your environment.
Right. Absolutely. And as we discussed earlier, that you don't have to know that your future lies in coding, because there are so many other numerous benefits coming out of learning something like this. The soft skills that you learn, teamwork, collaboration, leadership, innovative thinking, all these are skills that can be used in any other field of life. All right, moving on to the next question. Utkarsh is asking, since today's world is run by data, what is one class that you would recommend every student to take? Perhaps
That's
not
a good
every
point.
single student, but majority of them. What would your recommendation be?
I would
Effie, you
guess,
got an answer?
yeah, any course in computational thinking. I mean, the future is definitely, data. Talking a lot about big data today and how to analyze it and everything. It really depends on how you. I mean, when you look at the vast majority of population, majority are not going to be programmers. I mean, you know what? The majority, we're not even sure what's their profession is going to be because it's not invented yet. It wasn't invented yet. I mean, big data was invented, what, 5-6 years ago? It wasn't, I mean, we're talking about that today a lot. It wasn't there. I mean, I talked about the iPhone in 2007. It's moving very, very fast. And I think, again, learning skills like what computer science can provide you with can help you, focus in the future on what you want to do and whether data or data mining or big data is something you want to do.
It's interesting that you mentioned that maybe their profession has not even been invented yet. I think that's a
By
very
definition,
interesting
I mean,
point.
that's by definition, that's the situation today.
Yeah. I think that's what I'm going to tell people who ask me which career path do you want to pursue. I think that's the safest option to give, that it's not been invented yet. But all right. The next question is that keeping in mind that AI is actually now leading to job creation or growth, how is it that the extra time that students have at their disposal, how can that be used to maximize learning? So I think that is another benefit coming out of remote learning or virtual learning, that they are saving up on time that was otherwise spent just commuting from one place to another. So now that they have all that time at their hands, how can that be used to maximize learning? Any tips that you would like to give to our students who are tuned into this discussion today?
I think if there's any sort of class or something that they want additional information, there's so many platforms out there that they could look into for furthering their learning experience outside of school. So, there's extra courses that they could take, but it's a per student thing. It's not kind of a catch-all. It's going to be individual to that student, what they like or what they enjoy, where they want to spend their extra time. It could be sports. It could be something with, with coding or with AI, could be something with music. They just need to find what that passion is and then expand on it, whether it's, finding a course or a class to take on it, reading additional books on it just to get more information and to really, drive that passion.
Yeah, I totally agree with Pat. I mean, from sports to, we're a group of startups here in Israel that teach anywhere from computational thinking to sciences, math, music, Bible. I mean, there's a ton of different startups and edtech startups that offer their, merchandise for students. I think that at the end of the day, it's like in sports. What's the best sport I can do? The one that you can stick with, the one that you can actually love and go day by day and do it. That's it.
Right. And now that every student has so many courses or classes to tune into, and now that geographic boundaries really don't matter because everybody has access to a device and that can be used to tune into classes that are taking place kilometers and miles away. I think that's also another silver lining of the pandemic, that you can sit here and take classes that are taking place in the States or in Israel or in any other part of the country or the globe. All right, so our last question for today is there still a general age timeline for parents to try to introduce technological subjects to their kids? A general age timeline, or perhaps from your own experience, when is it that you introduced the same to your kids, and did that work in hindsight?
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to take that, Effie?
No, go ahead.
Again, I don't think there's a general timeline for parents to try and introduce things. I think kids really have a knack for asking questions or showing what their interests are. As soon as they start to show interests, or as a parent, you can make a recommendation. How would you like to try this, or is this something in school that you're enjoying? And if a student comes home and tells you that they're really taking to a certain subject, then that might be the place and time to introduce a new technology to them, or a new class. But again, I don't think there's a certain age timeline where you have to, push something on the kids. They'll tell you. I mean, kids are pretty knowledgeable about what they want and what they like, and they'll tell you. And I think that opens up the line of communication for the child and the parent to have a conversation and really figure out, what that passion is. And then for the parent to really help kind of push them, and a lot of positive reinforcement with it. So if they're showing an interest, show an interest back and show them how it can really impact them on a day-to-day basis.
I definitely agree with Pat, and I'll add that it's probably never too early and never too late. I mean, from kids, it's not definitely not necessarily technology, by the way. Students or kids or infants playing Lego is helping them a lot to understand or gain skills for the future. And we see sometimes high schoolers that they learn something humanic. I mean, they're learning history or geography, and where they're introduced to our platform or to coding, it changes their perception. So it's never too early, never too late.
I love how simple that sounds, that it's never too early and never too late. And I think that's definitely something that we'd be taking back from today's discussion. It was completely eye-opening. We discussed not only how there have been so many positives stemming out of the pandemic and out of Omicron, and they range from convenience to flexibility to pupil-teacher interaction to accessibility. And apart from that, we also discussed what the future holds and how is it that children, students, parents, and teachers can be better prepared to adapt to the future. So thank you so much, Pat and Effie, for tuning in all the way from States and from Israel. We had so much fun interacting with you both. And thank you so much for our viewers for tuning in to the very first episode of Edu-Viate, which is BrightChamps' very own web series. This discussion reminded us that there indeed is a silver lining to the pandemic and guided us in knowing what the future holds for EdTech. You can follow us on all leading social media platforms to know more about the second episode of this series. Thank you so much for tuning in, and thank you, Pat and Effie, for joining today's session.
Thanks again for having us.
Yes, thank you so much for having us. Really appreciate it. Bye, everyone.
Goodbye. Thank you.